Convicted cop killer Assata Shakur reportedly dead in Cuba at age 78. Cuban authorities have announced that Joanne Deborah Byron, born Joanne Deborah Chesimard, better known by her alias Assata Shakur, has died in Havana at age 78, citing health complications and advanced age. The reports of her death in Cuba, which was announced by the Cuban Foreign Ministry and was confirmed by her family through her daughter, Assata Shakur, who confirmed her death in a post describing the moment her mother took her last earthly breath. According to Fox News, the Cuban Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed the death on September 25, 2025, stating it was due to health conditions and advanced age. The U.S. Embassy in Havana was reportedly notified. This news has prompted a renewed look at a life that became legend, a fugitive, an activist, a symbol, and a mystery across decades. The news comes decades after Shakur, who was convicted of murdering a New Jersey state trooper, escaped prison and lived in exile in Cuba under political asylum. In 1977, Shakur was convicted for her role in the 1973 shootout that left State Trooper Werner Foerster dead. She was also accused of a series of related violent crimes, though controversy always surrounded her statements about her innocence or role in those events. 2 years into her life sentence, in 1979, she escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility for women with assistance from allies. She re-emerged in Cuba in 1984, where Fidel Castro's government granted her asylum, making her one of the United States' most infamous fugitives ever sheltered by a foreign power. Over the years, U.S. efforts to extradite her were repeatedly rebuffed by the Cuban government. In 2013, Shakur became the first woman ever added to the FBI's Most Wanted Terrorists list. A reward of $2 million was offered for her capture. In New Jersey, where much of Shakur's legacy remains controversial, officials expressed deep disappointment that she died without ever standing trial again or being returned to the U.S. to serve her sentence. The state's governor and police leaders called for maintaining the integrity of law enforcement and honoring Trooper Foerster's memory. Assata Shakur's life became a flashpoint for debates over race, justice, and activism. To supporters, she was a symbol of Black resistance. Her persona amplified in music, literature, and protest movements. To critics and law enforcement, she remained a convicted murderer and fugitive. Whether seen as a martyr or a criminal, Shakur's death is likely to reignite debates about asylum, political crime, U.S.-Cuba relations, and how societies reckon with radical dissenters. Shakur's time in exile in Cuba was neither quiet nor invisible. She wrote books, gave occasional interviews, and was popular in activist circles. But accessing her was constrained. As United States and Cuban relations waxed and waned, so did the transparency around political exiles. To U.S. authorities, she was a fugitive, one of the most wanted, with a multi-million bounty on her head. To supporters, she remained an icon of resistance, often foreground in cultural memory, music, and protest movements. While many news outlets focused on the facts of her passing, a notable essay, originally published by CNN, highlights how Patrick Oppman, as a 21-year-old college summer intern at CNN's Havana bureau in 1998, tracked down Shakur in Havana. The very act of finding her in Cuba was caught between journalism, intelligence, and political diplomacy. The essay's account suggests that the barriers were as much social and ideological as they were logistical, navigating Cuban bureaucracy, local informants, and one's own assumptions. Shakur's passing closes a chapter, but the questions around her life, identity, and exile remain deeply resonant. Justice versus symbolism. She never returned to U.S. custody. Critics argue she avoided legal accountability. Supporters argue that her conviction was unjust. Exile as a continuing struggle. Her life in Cuba was not simply a safe haven. It was a site of tension between her dissent, Cuba's political posture, and the U.S. demand for extradition. Memory and myth. Over time, her narrative evolved. Activist martyr, a revolutionary exile, and a controversial criminal, and much of her story exists in legend as much as in record. Race, identity, and liberation. The very essay's anecdote about being stopped in Havana over skin color underscores the complicated dynamics of race, even within leftist regimes, and how those dynamics shape Shakur's own view of resistance. As the global community marks her death, perhaps the greatest tribute is examining these layered contradictions, not simply seeing her as a captured villain or lauded martyr, but as a living paradox who challenged both systems and imagination.